Convicted felon who's now accused of forcing her into prostitution.
CBS 2 investigator Dave Savini has been exposing state child welfare system failures for years. He joins us now. Dave, this is hard to believe.
Joe and Marie, it is almost unreal what happened to this foster child, but the fact is DCFS placed a child sexual assault victim into the care of a man who should have never been given a license to be a foster parent.
A troubled 16-year-old girl was sent to this apartment building by DCFS. The state agency in charge of protecting her placed her in a foster parent's home here at the corner of 80th and Hermitage. But during our years-long investigation into DCFS, the CBS 2 investigators made an astounding discovery. The licensed foster parent who the state entrusted to care for that 16-year-old girl was a 24-year-old man with a lengthy felony criminal record. His name is Eric Johnson, and he's also an accused sex trafficker.
They license him as a foster parent. They license this 24-year-old pimp as a foster parent for a 16-year-old girl who had a history of being they were paying tax money to him as a foster parent while he was trafficking a 16-year-old girl in DCFS care.
For 3 years now, we've been investigating DCFS. We've uncovered a disturbing pattern by DCFS, bouncing children from home to home and not getting kids like this girl the proper specialized care. We discovered the teen's case this week when a judge heard evidence of how DCFS hired a psychologist nearly a year ago who told the Child Welfare Agency the girl needed to be in a secure residential treatment sex trafficking program.
So you're saying, on top of everything else, she had a history of being trafficked.
That's right.
And they put her in a home with a pimp.
That's right.
We asked Cook County Public Guardian Charles Goldberg about the way DCFS handled her case.
She needed a secure residential placement that was highly structured and had an intensive program for victims of sex trafficking. And DCFS never did that. They bounced her around from hospital to shelter to foster home.
The court order we obtained says while she has waited to get the proper care and placement she needs, the teen has been trafficked, sexually assaulted, shot, lived on the streets. Ultimately, the agency made a pimp the child's foster parent.
Over this 1 year, this girl has been raped, she's been trafficked, she's been abused, she's been beaten up, and she's been shot. She actually has a bullet in her leg.
We found Johnson has a lengthy criminal record. The teen was placed with him just months after he was released from federal prison after a 24-month sentence on a firearms charge. Before that, he spent 3 years in state prison for 2 robbery convictions. Despite all that, Johnson passed placement clearance and was approved by DCFS to become a foster parent.
How does a guy like that get licensed?
Yeah, it's impossible. It should be impossible.
As a point of clarification, 3-time felon Eric Johnson, 24, was approved by DCFS to foster the 16-year-old sex trafficking victim, but Johnson did not go through the typical foster parenting licensing and training process. Johnson was approved to be a fictive kin caregiver, and DCFS placed the child in his care. This link describes the different ways DCFS allows a person to receive foster children without licensing. You can be a relative, or what is called fictive kin, a family friend, and bypass the licensing process, but caregivers still need DCFS approval and a criminal background check. DCFS statement. In this case, the 16-year-old was placed with a friend of the family with the support of both her birth and adoptive mothers and the guardian ad litem in an effort to provide her with stability due to her history of running away from previous placements. Over the next several months, DCFS regularly met with the friend of the family as well as the adoptive and birth mothers and the guardian ad litem on a placement plan. These are the individuals with parental rights and responsibilities related to the child, and DCFS, therefore, works closely with them to determine an appropriate plan of action for the child. The child has since been removed from this household, and there are no other foster or adoptive children living in this household. The child is currently in the care of a DCFS private partner, and DCFS is working expeditiously to find a permanent and medically appropriate placement for this child that will provide her with the care she requires. Cook County Public Guardian Charles Galbert's response to DCFS statement. This is so disingenuous and dishonest. As you know, the teen expressed an interest in living with Johnson. DCFS represented that Johnson had passed DCFS placement clearance and that DCFS had approved Johnson as a paid fictive kin placement for her. Under DCFS regulations, DCFS must perform a criminal background check on an individual before he or she can pass DCFS placement clearance. DCFS either never did this required background check on Johnson or, if DCFS did do this required background check, it did not do so competently or was not concerned about his lengthy record. We most certainly never told DCFS or anyone else that we supported DCFS placing her with Johnson if DCFS required background check came back to DCFS with a record as long as an arm, including Johnson being a 3-time felon. Moreover, as is clear from Judge Murphy's order, DCFS also never disclosed to the court that Johnson had this extensive criminal background despite DCFS passing him for placement clearance and approving him as a paid fictive kin placement. It's just so disingenuous.